Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first 2025 Community Grants Committee meeting. We have Heidi joining us remotely. Heidi, welcome.
Thank you.
As we call the meeting to order, we'd like to do the adoption of the agenda. And the recommendation is that the agenda of the Community Grants Committee meeting dated January 13th, 2025 be approved as circulated. Any questions or comments from the members of the committee? I'll have a mover and a seconder. Mover is Kelsey, seconder is Cameron. All those in favor, please vote on your, oh, we're going to do it by hand? Okay. We'll go back to old school. So that's carried. Thank you. Any disclosure of pecuniary interests? Nope, I'm seeing none. Next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the Community Grants Committee meeting of July 8th in 2024. Seems so long ago. And the recommendation is that the minutes of the Community Grants Committee meeting dated July 8th, 2024 be approved as circulated. Mover, Joe, second by Cameron. And we'll ask all those in favor. And that is carried. Thank you, committee. Heidi, you can hear me well enough? Thank you. So we'll start into new business. And the first item on our agenda is the Terrence Haight application review. And I will turn it over to our favorite grant committee member.
Thank you, Chair Walton. Okay, so in your package, you should have a spreadsheet, and this year we have 20 applicants for Terrence Haight. So we're going to start with Terrence Haight. So there's 20 applicants. As per discussion with staff and with council, we did try to expand the catchment for applications. So there are a few new ones on here that we haven't seen, a few repeats that have been here. But essentially you're looking, there are 20 applications that are asking for over $160,000 in requests, and we have $30,000 to give away. So, last time I came in with recommendations. I have a list of those, or we can simply start at application 1 and go through and weed out what you think is relevant and what you think might not fly, and then review those. I'm happy to do either way the committee wants, but essentially we've only got 30 grand to give away.
Well, thank you, Amy. Committee, I'll ask for some comments and direction for Amy. Any comments, please feel free to bring them up.
I'm open to hearing the recommendations, of course.
Cameron, you're fine with the recommendations? Okay.
No, I'm sorry, I do have one question.
Please.
Friends, Mike is behind you.
Just hit the button and then swing it around if that works.
Application number 5, Friends of Muskoka Watershed, Environmental Impact Study of Road Salt. Probus has a group that's involved with environment, and they've questioned this, and they got a feedback that the amount of road salt was reduced legislatively. Is this still a valid application?
Through you, Mr. Chair, from a technical perspective, yes. There is some duplication of what they're looking to have, like looking to establish, but they're also looking for more than what is in the current road salt studies. So technically, yes, it is still a valid application. They meet all the criteria. However, there will be some duplication from existing documents.
Any other questions? Okay. We'll turn it back to you.
Okay. So every year, we have tracked who gets previous grants and how much money they're at and all of that sort of information. So, based on that, I was looking at 2, 4, 6, 8 grant awards this year. And just going through the applications and looking high level, the projects that I felt had the most coverage for the community and or youth, impact on groups that had either not applied or had applied previously but had a special project, and that I just felt had the highest impact were the Robotics Club, and these not for the full amounts that they requested, but just high level. The Robotics Club, the Curling Club, Gravenhurst Women's Group, Muskoka Ringette, the Legion and the Ladies Auxiliary, Severnbridge Ag Society, and the YWCA. So the rationale behind that. So Griffin Tech, obviously we've supported them year over year for the last 1, 2, 3, this would be the 4th award they would get. They are attending a new and different competition. They do have a budget that is basically, the entire amount is based on sponsorships and donations, so there isn't really any existing funding from the school or anything like that. So, looking at their budget, they put in, as we have debated in the past, they had registration fees, travel, food, things like that. So the parts and supplies portion of the budget, which is usually what we have supported, was $6,500. And so I had put down just a rough figure of $5,000, being not the full ask, so they still have to do some work to get some of that sponsorship, but it's not the quote-unquote operational side. It's not the registration. They don't have anything like clothing, which we had sponsored in the past to brand the team. They do have food, they have travel, they have some banking fees and things like that. So the parts and supplies, I think, was the only part that sort of made sense if we were interested. So that's sort of high level there. The Curling Club, I had put down for $8,500. In their application, they were looking for assistance with an upgrade to the lounge and a heat pump. So I put in for the heat pump, which was $8,500, leaving soft costs like decorating the lounge and redoing it as to the club, because the heat pump obviously is more integral to the operation of the club versus the pretty things. We've loved the green carpet for 47 years, and you know, even though it's changed. But so that I had down as $8,500. Gravenhurst Women's Group has applied a couple of times in the past, has not received funding. They were looking for a variety of costs, some tables, some speaker fees, some funding supplies, some soft items like that. And so basically took out all the soft items and left in the cost for the speaker fees and for some of the workshop materials. So again, it's non-operational, it's not tables, it's not coffee and tea. It's sort of paying for those professionals to come and speak to the women's group. Muskoka Ringette was looking for additional ice time. Sorry, $500. Sorry, $500. Hang on, I'm just going to assist. Pull in, push out. There you go.
We'll get through the presentation, keep your questions, and go back to them and ask them first. Thank you.
So, Muskoka Ringette Ice Time, they had requested $5,000. I sort of did them last, and so I was looking at $2,100, which would give them some additional ice time in Gravenhurst and subsidize some of the additional ice time they've had to seek elsewhere. The Gravenhurst Legion was applying for $5,800 and change, and that was for emergency crash bars on the doors, as well as some tables. So again, looked at the tables as sort of an operational cost. The cost of the doors was $1,700. I suggested we give them $1,700. The Ladies Auxiliary, similarly, they were asking for blinds and a fridge. Took the blinds out, left the fridge in, suggested $6,000. The Severnbridge, and the Legion last year did receive a large grant. It was for 3 different things. rebuilding the doors, alarm systems, and cameras. Thank you. I was like, there's. Yeah, and yes, recently they were broken into, so, Severn Bridge,
So,
yeah.
just, excuse me 1 minute. So, committee, if we could hold our questions, and then we're going to have to put on the mic, because this is being viewed publicly, and it's important that everybody gets a chance to hear what the committee is saying, and the questions are important that you're asking. So we'll follow the procedure. So carry on, Amy. Thank you.
So Severn Bridge Ag Society has applied in the past and last year they were given $2,500. It is their 150th anniversary this year of the Fall Fair. So they are gearing up to celebrate that. It is our only Fall Fair in the community, and despite some confusion, Severn Bridge is part of Gravenhurst. So they were requesting to have their entrance arch, thank you, replaced. So they asked for $4,728. Just for easy numbers, I suggested $4,700. And then the last was YWCA. They did receive funding last year. They received $1,500 last year. They're applying again for their Girls Unplugged program. So that is for girls in grades 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. It's a 12-week program, deals with self-esteem, emotional coping strategies, mentorship, basically all the great things that happen when you have hormones as a teenager and you're a female. And so I recommended, just again to round out, that we give the same as last year, $1,500. So that's high level the rationale as to why I suggested them, and the dollar figures that I was roughly pulling out of thin air based on the information in their applications.
Okay, thank you. Committee, let's start with some questions for Amy. Kelsey?
Did that add up to the 30,000? Sorry, I wasn't doing the mental math on that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it did.
Okay.
And Joe, I know you were,
Thank you. I just I had a question about this Ontario Energy rebate that was just announced, that things like heat pumps and fire doors and fridges, and if it would be wise to make it a condition that they also jointly applied to that program to save us a few dollars and get it from somewhere else.
so in saying that, my question would be, and it's a good point to bring up, if the timing, so we grant the money and give them the money and they get the rebate, do we ask for their rebate monies back as far as the grant that we've given them, so they can't put it towards something else, that we can obviously give this extra money to another worthy group within the town of Gravenhurst?
So currently in our agreement, there isn't language about additional external rebates. We talk about if the project doesn't go forward, we talk about final reports and information that way. We theoretically could put in an additional clause either in the acceptance letter or in the agreement that says, you know, we would encourage you to apply for X. If you do receive that rebate back, we'd like to see proof of it and have the funds returned for redistribution. We could do that, but there is nothing specific in the application, or in the agreement at this point that talks to that.
Joe?
Yeah, no, that's the language I'm looking for. I think we'd have to commit the money. We couldn't spend it somewhere else ahead of time, and if they get the rebate, don't we pay it upon completion, or do we give the money up front?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do
Okay.
give the money up front for Terrence Haight. CIP is reimbursed.
Okay, well, I think most of this is CIP. I think, oh, no, it's not. Curling Club door, yeah, it's both, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I would like to see that considered, because there's a whole lot of money out there, and they'll pay up to 30%, and can they use it for something else? That's something that the committee will have to discuss, if it's just encouraging, or if we want to redistribute the money. I just thought it was a great program.
So committee, we have a consensus that that's what we'd like to see if there is a funding grant money's returned, that would come in back to the Terrence Haight Fund, and then if it comes back, I don't necessarily think that maybe it would be used in this year's distribution. But if it does come back, and if it's, what was the amount, 8,500 for the grant for them, or to the curling club?
Correct.
So if the heat pump that they're getting is, and I'm using rough figures, 10,000, and they get a $4,000 grant, then we would get back 4,000. That would, and I would ask finance, would that 4,000 then go back into the Terrence Haight and be used for next year after this year's applications have been approved?
To your worship, that would be correct.
Your worship.
Oops, sorry, Mr. Chair. My apologies, it is Monday morning.
Madam Mayor's giggling.
Yeah, so any funds that would be,
So next year's amount could be 34,000, if that was a rough estimate.
it would have to be, the amount for the year would have to be approved by council at the budget.
Yeah,
That's definitely a recommendation that the committee could put forward,
yeah.
bringing the next budget to the town for approval.
Okay, thank you. I think the concern would be just that we know that rebate money would be coming back into the Terrence Haight account. So, Joe?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, there's no incentive. If you give me $4,000 and say, go get a grant and then pay me back, like, why would I bother? I'm thinking more holding back 30% of the total cost. And we still commit the money. And if they don't get the grant, they get the money. But I don't think there's any incentive to pay them and try and get it back. That's awkward, I think.
Amy?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The only challenge would come in with the qualification to get the rebate. So they might have to do the work, which means they would need all of the money. So a secondary incentive, instead of the money coming back to the fund, could be, it could go to the additional items that we are not funding in their application. So for example, with the curling club, if you were to replace the heat pump and you got back the cash from the rebate, then we could potentially authorize them to do the other portion of their application. So there is, that's sort of the incentive, that they get to do both by applying for a rebate. I would have to look into what the intricacies are for getting the rebate back, because my guess is do the work, submit the paid invoice and cash flow, proof of payments, and then they probably get back the rebate, in which case if we don't give them the money, some of the applicants might not be able to do the work.
And my concern would be that we've already looked at the other portion of their application with tables and chairs as not being part of the Terrence Haight program. So I wouldn't want to see that monies go towards that when we've already approved and said that chairs and tables are not part of the program. So we can research that, and then if the committee needs to weigh in upon the decision, we can do that.
Yep.
Okay. Cameron?
Through the chair to Amy. Amy, do you get any feedback from applicants who say, I'm not applying because the same people get the same money every year?
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, not really. We've, last year we had some feedback because we did only award, 11, 9. So last year we did receive feedback saying, why did I not receive funding? I've received it in the past. Was there a reason? And the rationale was simply explained there was a large capital project that we supported, and so that's where the funding went. The feedback we do get is the application is onerous. We're a small organization. We might not have all the documentation, so we get that kind, but not, at least not in the last 2 years. Not that, well, we never get it, so why would we apply?
So my follow-up question, I have a disagreement on the robotics team. I disagree with it last year. I take the attitude that this fund is for the greater good of Gravenhurst, and I don't know how this fits in.
Through you, Mr. Chair, a fair point. I think, for me, the application fit in that frequently we hear there's not a lot of stuff or activities for teenagers to do, that some of the offerings that we have through either recreation or through the curling club or through other locations they're not interested in it. It's not mentally stimulating or socially stimulating enough. So part of me looked at this application and said, to me, those are kids that otherwise might not be captured in other academic or sports pursuits. And so if those kids can be engaged and be interested and stimulated, then to me it's keeping them from doing other things, and it's engaging them in a way that hopefully results in our labor pool being expanded and the kids being engaged. So that's the reason why I would look at supporting it. I think too, robotics, I think it's team building, but not overtly team building. It's creativity, but not overtly creative. So to me, it just looked like it was a section of the demographic we weren't capturing elsewhere.
I guess follow-up question to that on Cameron's behalf would be, how many students would be involved in the robotic program? Do we know?
To you, Mr. Chair, through the information we received last year, I think there were about 20. So there are builders, there are drivers, there are programmers, there are kids that support sponsorship, and then there's sort of like a backup driving team as well.
Heidi, you have a question?
I do. I'm curious why Enliven Care and Hospice were not considered. Is it because the town of Gravenhurst does provide funding to them, or is there another reason why it wasn't considered?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So hospice is the easier answer. So this particular one, they were essentially looking to supplement donations that were not received by mail. So during mail strike, they noticed that they saw a decrease. So because there wasn't specificity on where the money was going, the concern was if we're just making a donation, there are other avenues they could pursue outside of Terrence Haight. So that's why hospice wasn't discussed or wasn't in my recommendation. Enliven Cancer Care. So we talked reasonably heavily about this as a staff team. So the concern with them was that they are currently offering some of these programs. They were applying to basically roll out a full slate of programs in Gravenhurst as they do in other communities in the spring. And so our concern was just that it runs the line of things they're already doing and want to expand, but not necessarily a new and unique project to Gravenhurst. So not that what they submitted wasn't important, but it just felt like they're sort of offering some basic courses here and they wanted to expand, but they're already doing the activity.
Anything else, Heidi?
No, those were my two. I strongly felt that they should be considered, so good explanation.
Thank you.
Sorry, just one question, Amy. Mine won't open for Muskoka Discovery Center. What was it that they were asking for?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So Muskoka Discovery Center was looking to implement, so this year there was a pilot program that they ran and they wanted to implement it full-time where there would be an Indigenous interpreter on site 1 day a week offering educational programs based on the new exhibit and on Indigenous history in Muskoka. So they were looking at doing, when they created the new exhibit, they consulted with at least 7 different elders from different Indigenous communities. So they were looking to bring those people back in to help explain the exhibit. And if it's successful, obviously they'd add it to their existing programming.
Excuse me. That sounds like a sponsorship play.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So it is semi-questionable. One could argue it's possibly operational. One could argue that it could be sponsored. the programming they're offering most definitely is valuable and I think is worthy of being pursued, but it might be more suitable through a cultural grant or through a tourism grant or an ongoing sponsor versus a one-off grant to provide 1 year of funding.
Cameron?
Mr. Chair, to the rest of the committee, I just want some small discussion, if you will, on the Trinity United Church application.
Okay.
I thought that was more worthy than some of the ones that have come forward in terms of the greater good of Gravenhurst.
And the Trinity United Church asked for 7,800, as I can see. And what was that?
Sound equipment. Do you want the rationale as to why it's not in there?
Yeah, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the rationale as to why it's not in there, quite plain and simply was they applied last year and we had reasonable debate around whether it was considered supportive of a religious activity or not. The church itself is evolving into more of an event space. So I did not include it given the discussion from last year, but do agree that it fits all the criteria. It's not for the religious activities of the church, which in our policy is classed as exempt. It is for the event space. So recently there was the Christmas Carol performance where equipment was rented by the event provider because the church didn't have it as a space. So it certainly could be included. I'm happy to modify any of the numbers that we have, pull something out, put something in. But it was basically because of last year's conversations.
Okay. Any other questions or comments, committee? So I think we need to take a look at the 8 items that Amy has recommended and make a decision on whether we keep them or whether we reduce them. And disperse money elsewhere that you feel is more important or beneficial to the community. Who wants to start?
Let's get the easy stuff out of the way. I agree with the Severn Bridge. I agree with the Severn Bridge allocation of $4,700.
Okay.
You're going to have to push me for the rest of them.
Sorry, I'm just trying to recall them. I think you said Ringette was included, correct, for the ice space? Yes. That one sounds good to me.
Okay. Ringette was
other-
2,100.
Yes. Any other comments? When
Not to be nickel and dime, I had it down for $2,000, just a nice round number.
Sorry, just trying to recall. Was it the women's group or was it the YWCA?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I had both. So the initial, GHS Robotics Club, 5,000.
Yeah.
Gravenhurst Curling Club, 8,500. Gravenhurst Women's Group, 500.
Okay.
Ringette, 2,100. Royal Canadian Legion, 1,700. Gravenhurst Ladies Auxiliary, 6,000. Severn Bridge Ag, 4,700. And YDub, 1,500.
Perfect. Thank you.
15?
15, 1-5.
So I have a question in regards to Ladies Auxiliary of 6,000. And could you, again, tell us what that was for?
For sure. So Ladies Auxiliary, they had requested a commercial fridge. And they had requested blinds. The blinds I took out. So at this point, the fridge that they have is reaching end of life. It is used reasonably heavily for catering, pretty much all the catering at the Legion. Private rentals use it. The Women's Auxiliary uses it when there's bingos, meat draws, spaghetti dinners, all of that good stuff. And so the fridge itself is around $6,000.
Okay. I mean, obviously, it's a necessity, but I feel that a portion of the money or the portion of the cost of the fridge could be utilized, maybe go 4,000. Anybody in the committee would like to weigh in?
Did we give them something for a fridge last year, or was it that they applied for a fridge as well last year?
And you're right, that we did give substantial money to the Legion last year.
You are correct. So applied, not replied. They applied for $6,500 last year, and we gave them $4,600.
Was that for the fridge?
Hang on, am I on the right line? I think it was air conditioning.
Oh, okay.
I can go back and look. Am I?
And sorry, just to be clear, they run everything that they do out of the Legion?
Yes.
Okay, so it was air conditioning at the Legion,
It's, yes,
but it's separate than the Legion.
correct. So it's a technicality. There's two
Yes.
different groups.
Yeah.
It's kind of like CIP where the landlord and the tenant both apply.
Yeah.
But yes, so yes, we did give them money last year, and it was for air conditioning.
Okay.
Any comments? So are we in favor of the whole 6,000? Or would we be in favor of 4,000 or 3,000, committee?
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, I think it's a perfect example of giving them the 4 and asking them to apply for the Ontario Energy Rebate funding for the 30%. Because we have given them, a fair amount.
I'm not sure if this is too demanding or not. You can tell me. But is it something that you could say to them, okay, we're going to give you this amount and you have to show proof that you're applying for the rebate?
Through Mr. Chair, so the only challenge is because Terrence Hayes is governed by a policy, theoretically, we're dancing around policy changes. So technically, right now, no. Not that we couldn't, so usually, right, we try to have a meeting sometime later in the year to talk about eligibility criteria and about the policy. So in theory, we could do that going forward. And usually, like, we should do a policy review any year. So technically, we don't have that authority. We could have very pointed conversations with the applicants, and we can make recommendations through our letter of acceptance. Just the enforceability of certain things are not within the policy's framework yet.
So any, Cameron?
Okay, I got one specific one then. I would like to swap out the curling club for 8,500. I don't think that's necessary. I would like to put in the church for 7,800, because the curling club also has an application in the CIP. And from what I hear, the curling club is doing quite well right now. And so in terms of benefit to the town, I just thought we needed a facility like the church could provide, and I thought that's where we should put the money.
And you're talking the full 8,500?
Well, you can leave behind 700. You could leave behind the difference between the two numbers or move it somewhere else.
Comment?
Yeah, thank you. To you, I respectfully am going to disagree. The curling club was the one that stepped down last year in order for the Legion. They withdrew. They've been, a good community provider. There's so much goes on there. It serves so many people, and in order to keep their membership, dollars down, they need the help. I would tend to support the curling club.
Okay, let me be the devil's advocate if I would. And if we were to take the 8,500 and split it in half and give 4,250 to the curling club and 4,250 to the church. Because we know that the curling club's going to apply for a rebate. So the funding we're going to give them, and I'm sure the curling club would be in a financial position, or could be in a financial position with the 4,200 to complete the air conditioning. So if the total bill is $8,500 and they know they're going to get whatever the rebate back is, say $3,000 or $4,000, they could do that. So we could split the curling club at $4,250, and that $4,250 then would go towards the United Church sound system, which I think is a beneficial increment, so that all of Gravenhurst, because they do run events now, and as Amy has mentioned, the United Church has become an event center, and proper sound system in the event center would be for all involved. And I know that you had made the comment in regards to Christmas caroling and sing-alongs, and I know they do certain plays, and there's orchestra that comes in and plays throughout the summer. What is that group called? Do you remember?
Muskoka Concert Series?
Muskoka Concert Series. So again, and they fill the house as well. Again, I feel both are major contributors to the betterment of this community. I'd like to see the money maybe split and go towards both. Joe?
Yeah, thank you, through you. Question to staff. Do you know if either would get accomplished if we just give them half? Because that's my fear. You don't give them the whole thing, and then the money just doesn't get used at all because they can't afford the other half.
Through you, Mr. Chair, you're reading my mind. I was just looking to see. I'm just looking. We do ask them, if you don't receive the funding, what would happen. So Trinity essentially would say they would continue to use the existing system and would continue to fundraise until they could afford the upgrade. And let me just look and see. I'm assuming, well, I shouldn't assume. I was going to say, as far as the curling club goes, let's see what they have here. So basically, they have a 5-year plan. If they were to receive a reduced amount, the 5-year facility plan would have to be adjusted and would be significantly impacted. So essentially, both would figure out how to exist without the funding.
So in saying that, their plans would adjust, so something else may not happen as soon as they wanted it, but they could adjust it to bring it up to fulfill. You're shaking your head, Councillor Morphy?
No, I don't think so. I think it's, we've got
Well,
to make a decision. And somebody gets their wish and somebody doesn't. Because if you give somebody half, coming up with the other half versus paying the rent or paying the heat or the bills, that's why this is a wish list, sorry.
Amy, you're coming up with a thought.
I'm percolating here. So just drawing on the municipal accommodation tax as another avenue and thinking about potentially Trinity United could apply to Tourism Gravenhurst for the amount of money and potentially even more money based on the tourism information that they've given as part of their grant. So they do have 8, I believe it is, concerts listed here that currently take place. So potentially they could apply to have that board covered through that and maybe even some additional marketing money. They list here Muskoka Concert Band, the Wednesday Summer Concert Series. They have an October concert, the Muskoka Philharmonic Series, the Christmas Carol, and they also host some recitals. So, I mean, the potential runner-up prize could be that They don't get Terrence Haight, but we could encourage them to apply to that fund, which does not, it's for for-profits and not-for-profits, so they would be eligible to apply. We could coach them to ask for some additional dollars as well, and they might end up getting more out of the gate as an option. It's just that Tourism Gravenhurst funds don't cover things like heat pumps and things like that, but they do cover programming. So that could be an option if we weren't comfortable splitting the money and wanted to give all to one and none to the other, that might be a suitable plan B for them.
I might be reaching again, so you can let me know if this is a reach. To me, I'm fully on board for the full amount for the curling club. I think it has the greatest impact on the most amount of people. But could you say something like, okay, if they get the rebate, or if the auxiliary gets the rebate as well, the rebate will be put towards the church. If any money comes back, they can get whatever. Like, is that a thing?
Through you, Mr. Chair. That would be a bit of a stretch. Yes. Excellent idea. Bit of a stretch.
Cameron?
The curling club's in here for a slug of money in the CIP program. So if you give them money, does it have to be specifically used for what's written in the word of each application?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes. So in both agreements, Terrence Haight and CIP, it basically states what the money is to be used for, and then they do have to submit a final report to show that they used the money for that. And if they didn't, we reserve the right to take the money back or to make them ineligible for future grant applications. And same CIP, it's spelled out based on the quotes that they've submitted. So currently, they're not duplicating the heat pump at this point. They've basically, we put the funds out there, we encourage people to apply, they are taking full advantage of that opportunity.
Okay. Heidi?
Yeah, I support the curling club as well. Just wanted to say that.
Okay.
I just have another question for Cam. So you mentioned about not being in support of robotics. Would you rather support the church than give the $5,000 to robotics? Yeah.
For two reasons. Because we've given them money in the past, and if we use the word, it affects the greater amount of people. I think the church affects a greater amount of people with what they want to do than the robotics club. I mean, I could stop 10 people in town and ask them about the robotics club, and none of them would know anything about it.
Okay, good points. Thank you. So let's go back to the consensus here and the direction that we want to look at. We are getting a strong feeling that the curling club is what we want to support going forward with the amount that they have been suggested at $8,500. I'm hearing concerns about the Gravenhurst robotics. Heidi or Kelsey?
I just know it's always a topic of discussion. Like, it's always a controversial one, I feel. So I'm just curious. Like, I'm not really torn in either which way, but I do, like, to me, I guess I'm looking at it as, like, how many people will this affect? Will it have a greater impact? That kind of thing. And like I said, we have supported them years in the past. I don't know.
And I think the committee has to look at what is the greatest impact on the community and what the most members of this community are going to enjoy of the expenditure and the monies that are coming out today. So, Amy?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the committee. If it helps, we have funded the robotics club in previous years just over $9,000. So they received $5,000 in 2024. They received $4,241 in 2023. So to Kelsey's point, they have been successful in the past. We could reallocate that. We have not funded anything to Trinity at all.
So if we remove the robotics 5,000 and go to the church, that leaves us $2,800 short. Would that still put that program on hold? And Heidi, you have a question?
Yeah, my only comment with robotics is it is the future. Like it's the younger generation that we're trying to support. We're trying to support with the Y, the girls. So my thought is we should also support robotics. And knowing that the church has the opportunity to apply for a tourism grant of sorts, either maybe split the robotics money or give it all to robotics and encourage the United Church to apply for the other grants that are available through other areas.
Okay.
My thoughts.
Joe, you had a question?
Well, just to the point, we were discussing reducing the ladies auxiliary down to 4,000, which gave us 2,000 more to move around, and the 2,800 we could.
Say that again, please.
We discussed the ladies auxiliary at the Legion going from 6,000 down to 4,000. So that would, if we agreed on that, because they get applied to the energy rebate, that would give us another 2,000 to monkey around with. And with the 2,800 left over, I guess a little math needs to be done, Rob, for us. Okay, you're trying to keep up with the, yeah, okay. But there is a few dollars there, but I'm fully in support of the robotics. I really am. These kids, I mean, they're going off to engineering schools and that, you know, and their ability to fundraise is just not like 20 parents out there selling cookies. I mean, you know, you've got churches and curling clubs with a lot more ability to raise money. I support the robotics club very much.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can give you an update. I stole my financial friend's spreadsheet here, so I'm fancy footing here. So, to Councillor Morphy's point, we could rejig it this way. So 3,600 to the robotics club, 8,500 to the curling club, 500 to Gravenhurst Women's Center group, sorry, $2,000 to Muskoka Ringette, 1,700 to the Legion, 4,000 to the Ladies Auxiliary, 4,700 to Severn Bridge, 5,000 to Trinity United. And that totals $30,000. Oh, I left out the Y. This is why I don't work in finance. Please hold. If I take that down
Well,
to
if you
2,100.
take the curling club to 7,000 and leave the,
I could reduce the curling club, or if I put the Y dub back in, robotics would get 2,100. So robotics 2,100. Everybody else, so 8,500 to the curling club, 500 to the women's group, 2,000 to Ringette, 1,700 Legion, 4,000 ladies, 4,700 Severn Bridge, 5,000 Trinity, 1,500 YDub. $30,000.
questions or comments?
I guess it's hard when we're talking about the rebate because we're not like sure exactly with the curling club if it's something they would get or not. But I mean, if we gave them 7,000, like you mentioned, then if they did, they would be more than covered. And if they put the rest into whatever it was that they needed, then we're still up, I think, in that way.
Through Mr. Chair, where would you want the extra money then to go back to robotics?
I was thinking the church to switch it up, but that was just my thought.
1,500, so 6,500. Okay. So that would bring, that would be 2,100 to robotics, 7,000 to the curling club, 500 to the women's group, 2,000 to Ringette, 1,700 Legion, 4,000 ladies, 4,700 Severn Bridge, 6,500 Trinity, 1,500 YDub.
Comments from the committee? I mean, I know it's very difficult when you have $160,000 of applications, and we have a fifth of that monies to be able to disperse. And sometimes those out there feel it's unfair that, you know, we should have more, and boy, would I love to have more. Would I love to give $160,000 away to this community, because it's a great community, and all these applications do great things within this community. But the reality of it, you know, and one of the downfalls, and I happened to be around the council table when the monies was received from Mr. Haight, and there was no direction on where the monies were to go. So hopefully if anybody's out there watching and they plan to give the town of Gravenhurst a lot of money, please, in that donation, request where you would like the money to go. And it would save us all a lot of back and forth, because there are these folks, and we're dealing with 8, and I'm looking at the list of 40, and they're all great community supporters. Every one of them deserve to get what they're asking for. But the reality of it is we have $30,000 to do with, and we're trying to do with what will impact the community in the greatest amount. So committee, any questions or comments? Cameron?
Just in fairness to Joe, I mean, if she wants to make a last-ditch effort on behalf of the robotics, you know, I'm willing to listen. I just looked down the list, and I just don't see where we take the money from. Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm good with the 2,100. They've had, you know, we have supported them in the past. I just, yeah, no, I'm fine with the numbers the way they play out. Thank you.
Everything sounds great to me.
I'm going to call for a resolution. Can I get a resolution?
Just need the values for each one, and say it verbally.
Okay.
I don't know whether you want to read that or not.
Do you start with
Well,
this?
I've got it written down. So we're going to go to the Gravenhurst High School robotics at $2,100. The Gravenhurst Curling Club of $7,000. Women's group at $500. Ringette of $2,000. The Legion of $1,700. Ladies Auxiliary, $4,000. Severnbridge Agricultural Society, $4,700. The YWCA at $1,500.
Trinity United.
And Trinity United will be $6,500. That's what I have as, so I'd like a mover and a seconder. Councillor Morphy, Kelsey?
I'd say be resolved that.
So be it resolved, the Community Grants Committee recommended councils support the following applications through the 2025 Terrence Haight Financial Assistance Program. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you, Heidi.
Okay.
Do we have time to do all of this yet?
Sure.
Do it.
You're killing me.
Mr. Chair, sorry. I have one question. I don't see a number in for the Frosty Pint.
Ah, yes. The new one should have it. 11,500.
Okay. You?
So 3, Mr. Chair, CIP. So I've just circulated the newest version of the spreadsheet, which theoretically may or may not help with your reading ability of the grants. So there were a few updates that we made that were submitted prior to the deadline, but were lost within my number of staff emails that I've returned to after taking extended holidays, as well as we reviewed just to make sure our numbers were correct. So the version that you had received, the Frosty Pint, did not have a dollar figure in it. However, they actually did submit quotes for $11,500. So that is an update in the new spreadsheet, as well as, just looking here, I believe the Mad Taylor was updated. Was there any? Sorry, I should say Ellen is our expert. I'm just kind of winging it. So, Ellen, were there other than Frosty Pint? Was that the only one I missed? Okay. I think we just received some photos of some work and things like that. So Frosty Pint was the only missing point. So we have 17 applications in front of us this year. As you recall, last year we expanded the CIP boundary to include basically a portion of Winewood that was missed and Bethune Drive from Bishop Street all the way out to Coon Road. So that now included places like the Frosty Pint, Sander Motors, Taste Buds, so quite a few properties that were out there. As staff, we went out in June with the OPP and we canvassed all of our CIP businesses to let them know about the CamSafe program that we implemented. That was a new initiative that was brought up last year to try and help extend camera coverage, security camera coverage within the CIP area. And at that time, we visited all the new CIP properties to inform them that, hey, you're now part of this and you should apply. And we are pleasantly surprised that we actually got 2 for sure, possibly 3 new applications from those businesses. So they were thrilled to be part of it. They have submitted applications, so it's kind of nice to see that the expansion was actually, our thought process fleshed out to people that were deserving. So those 3 locations that are in here are Coon Brothers, the Frosty Pint, and Dylan Fick. So, and that does not have a business name. It is a commercial property. Used to be where Muskoka Surf and Turf was located. Prior to that, it was the pizza station. So it is a commercial property, even though it is listed as a single person. In this round of applications, I believe there is only the one residential property, which is application number 17. I know we've debated back and forth about residential locations being in here, but so it is about 300 meters north of the arch. Not good at that. It's Nelson, corner of Nelson and Muskoka Road, I believe. So it is that stretch of houses that are sort of within our commercial entrance. They do have an impact. They're some of the first few houses you see when you come into Gravenhurst. I know we have had questions in the past about residential properties, but it is in an area where we have actually granted out, I believe, 5 applications to houses for structural upgrades. So we've included it in there. It's actually quite a robust application for a residential property. They brought in a whole do-a-tang, and it was about 30 pages of information. So, so that's kind of it in a nutshell. The only outstanding question I have is from my colleague in finance is how much money we have to give away. Which I have a number, but I want to make sure it's correct.
Rob?
Yeah, through to Mr. Chair, I can confirm that the number that Ms. Taylor's referring to is 254,356. Is that what the number you were originally working from? Yeah.
Well, higher than I have, but that's good. Yep.
That number is, it doesn't reflect some of the current funding, so just to bring it up to date, we do have calculations that I come up with just over $206,000 for monies available.
So we have 206,000 available,
That's correct.
and we have 254,000 in ask.
Sorry, no, what I was referring to is Ms. Taylor had worked on the calculation for when she was tracking. It was just some updates that she didn't have available to her when she came up with those figures. It was just reflective of monies that were spent in 2024,
Okay,
along with funding that's been allocated for 2025.
okay.
I have an ask of 184,720.
Yep.
184,720 is what And that, I'm going to check with Amy, that looks accurate in your book as well, and we have 206,000 to disperse.
You are correct.
Amy, is Jones Road within the map of CIBC? CIBC, not CBI.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So, technically, yes. This is a fun one when we actually got the application and the inquiry. There is a sliver of the property that is addressed as Jones Road that touches Bethune Drive. So in the property fabric we did, when we were describing properties, we said properties fronting on Bethune Drive from X to X. So technically, the back of that property is in our CIP area because it fronts on Jones and Bethune. Yeah. It is technically the pit property. Yeah.
Question, then, we have more than we have asked.
Correct.
What is the deal? Do we have to give out all the money? Or if we don't give out the 184, what happens with the difference?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So you are correct. We have more money than has been asked for. Any money we don't give away sits in the reserve for future use. The reality is, because the CIP is a reimbursement program, technically we don't give any money out in advance, right? So we just earmark it for future use. At this point, we're sitting at about every dollar that we invest turns into $20. The owner adds another 20 of their own dollars to it. So the reality is, allocating it out doesn't harm us in any way. It is encouraging development in a number of properties that should have it. So there's not necessarily a real financial solid reason to not grant it out unless we fundamentally just disagree that the project is worthy.
Just one remark about the residential number 17. 10,000 seems really steep to rent out one room. I think that's kind of what they're trying to get at. I don't know. It seems quite steep to me when I'm like, oh, how much? Yeah, I don't know. I guess it comes back to the impact and everything like that.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to say what I think I should, and then I have Ellen as my backup in case I've missed a critical piece of information. So what they're essentially looking to do is there will be structural improvements within the house, but then they're also looking to do external upgrades on the outside as well. So I believe we're looking at some windows. I believe there's some fencing and that is falling down and dilapidated. Paint, and then inside what they need to do to make it as well. So it's not just the conversion for bed and breakfast, but it's also external stuff as well. They did come in asking to also remove and replace they're calling it a shed, but basically it's a garage structure, accessory structure that's not included in this. So basically because it's ineligible, so there is additional investment that they're doing as well. So it is also outside stuff.
Cameron?
We had this discussion last year. Wasn't it taken forward to exclude residentials, and what happened?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we cannot legally exclude them based on the provisions of the Planning Act for community improvements programs. So we did not approve any residential structures last year. We did not actively recruit any residentials, but technically it is still in the criteria because it needs to be.
Councillor Morphy?
Thank you, through you. I can't say Amy. To Amy. My concern on 17 is it says heat retention. It sounds like we're buying insulation for their home, and it's community improvement. I mean, it's the facade, it's the look and feel, the character of the business to help, beautify the downtown and wharf and the core parts. Can you explain what the heat retention part of this money is how that applies?
Sure thing, through you, Mr. Chair. So essentially the house is a 1940s type construction. So for sure there is definitely some insulation issues that would be addressed. So if they were going to rip out the interior walls, they're going to be doing some insulation upgrades as well. I don't believe they've requested windows, but Ellen, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, so they,
Just turn on your microphone.
okay. So yes, they did request some window upgrades that they threw in, and that's what the heat improvement would do. That I think they need double pane windows, and so that's their pitch there. And I think that is the bulk of their application. It looks like they're going to replace the current siding on the east side, which is facing the street, and the south, and then windows kind of in both locations, and they're looking specifically for energy efficient windows. So it is all the kind of curb appeal side of that house, yeah.
Cameron?
Mr. Chair, maybe it's kind of a unique year where we've got more money than asked. Could we, as a process, start with the first one and just go down them and eliminate stuff we wanted and then see where we sit at that point?
Absolutely. That's committee's, so wants to do that, we can go through that. So we'll start with number 1 item, full potential.
So this is located on the Main Street. Full Potential in the past has received facade improvements. So she received a new awning. She is in the unfortunate situation where there is a structural improvement needed to the roof, which is affecting the top portion of the building on the front facade as well. And so basically she needs to put in a new roof. It needs to have a new base cover, drain the pipes, and then repaint the front portion and do a couple of other cosmetic upgrades. So she has been successful in the past. It is a business in our downtown core that is successful. She's been in her current location 10 years, and I believe we've funded 3 projects.
Okay. Any questions from the committee on the first one? No? Item number 2, Muskoka Surf and Turf.
So Muskoka Surf and Turf is in the previous Rombo's building. They moved in October, we'll say that, of 2024. Yep. Previously, Rombo's has received that building, as the owners of that building have received funding for facade upgrades. This particular application, there is a new awning that was placed on the front of the building, so it was done after the application was received. So it is an eligible application, but essentially it's a new awning, some new paint touch-ups, some signage, and they are proposing to do some additional accessibility upgrades to the entrance. So it is a new business in an existing building. The tenant is applying for the upgrades to support the business operations.
Cameron?
When I was going over this, I had 2 criteria in mind. A, whatever we were spending money on it, I want it to be visible. I don't want to see something I can't see. And second of all, maybe we should concentrate in one area so that we can see some improvement in the town. Not to exclude anybody who's in a different area, but if we could put our money in one area, we might get more bang for the buck. So in terms of this one here, I just have trouble with the e-commerce sites.
Fair point. Are we talking about well-fed, though, the next one?
No.
Number 3?
I don't know where the line goes.
Okay, so that's the next one. Let me talk about well-fed. So,
There's no line after point number 3, because 1, oh, I see. Muskoka Surf is just one line.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
yep, that's go. That's fine. So well-fed, excellent segue. Well-fed is, so again, new owners took over the business in, let's say, June, maybe even May. They are now, looking to do some improvements. The website is, yes, touch and go. However, the business currently is walk-in only. It is a young couple that has taken it over, and so in addition to sort of hitting the ground running with the operations of the business, they're now looking what other improvements can they do going forward. So when we spoke with them, we did say, this is questionable, you might not get it, but we did see the inherent value of being able to order online, take all of those clients that are currently not able to visit them during working hours. So for example, you're ordering catering at 7 o'clock at night and they've closed. So we could potentially take that one out. We did let them know that it was a bit of a stretch. But for us, the whole coming out of COVID, we recognize that as much as it's not a really tangible thing, it's like security cameras. They're kind of there and they serve a purpose, theoretically once you're in crisis mode. We looked at this kind of the same way as it's empowering them in a different way to try and be more successful coming out of COVID, but 100% understand that it is questionable.
I don't think any other businesses come to us and ask us to help them with their online ordering.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we did have a couple of businesses request point of sale equipment. So basically to take them from a manual cash register, the previous years, I think 2021, maybe even 20. So we have funded things like point of sale systems. And we have done creation of a website where there wasn't one. This would be the first one where we would be funding an add-on to an existing item.
Okay. Item number 4, Dock of the Bay.
So Dock of the Bay down at the wharf, they essentially are, they were looking to do some cleaning and some cosmetic repair to the facades of the building. So that's essentially what they've applied for. The building hasn't had any previous CIP funding. I think I'm correct on that. So this is the first application from that property. And basically it's just to give the love to the outside of the building that is needed from just being exposed to the elements over time.
Sorry, just to clarify, you said that they have to show that the work is done in order to get reimbursed for this
Correct.
program as well. Okay.
You are correct.
Mad Taylor?
So the Mad Taylor is on the main street across from the Opera House. So the owner of the building, not the tenant in this instance, is applying. Essentially, so we funded this building, I want to say 2019 or 2020. But essentially they need to do some more brick repointing and replacement. As well, there was a mural that was placed on the side of the building. Probably in the mid to late 90s. And so that mural is in disrepair. It needs to come down. It is not, the program was instituted a while ago by the Chamber of Commerce, the BIA in the town. None of those organizations have taken ownership over the mural. Because the mural has been sitting there, it is affecting some of the brickwork as well. So this would be, the mural would come down, the brick would be repointed and replaced where needed. And then as well, they would be doing some additional siding, fixing up of the doorway, and just a few other cosmetic repairs. Reasonably small amount of funding to achieve what they need to do. But again, from a visibility perspective, it is adjacent to Muskoka Surf and Turf, so we'd have 2 buildings within the same block that would have some new work done.
And we go to Muskoka Cremation and Burial.
I'm going to back up and do Dylan Fick if you're okay with that.
Back up and do what?
Number 7.
Oh,
Sorry.
there's nothing in the block. Sorry,
No, we jumped over. It's all
I
good.
apologize.
So Dylan and Alex Fick own 415 Bethune Drive. So that's the former Muskoka Surf and Turf / pizza station / Dee's Place, depending on how far back in Gravenhurst history you want to go. They purchased the building maybe 2 years ago. And they do have a home-based business currently operating out of the upstairs. They are actively looking for a new commercial tenant on the downstairs. What they would like to do is facade upgrades. So it is a 2-story building. And so they're looking basically just to beautify it and just to assist in the sales of finding a new tenant.
And now we can go.
Now I can do Muskoka Cremation?
Sure.
Muskoka Cremation and Burial. So this is a new business that expanded to Gravenhurst in 2024. It is located on Main Street. It used to be the Mains on Main hair salon. So they're looking, if you've been watching if you've been driving around that area, you can see they've done a fair amount of interior work on the building. And so what they're looking to do is now beautify the exterior of the building. Basically, they would be doing some soften and some fascia and then some cosmetic stonework on the front of the building. So they did not apply for anything on the inside. They footed that bill all by themselves, but they would like to do a facade improvement on that building.
And we have the Gravenhurst Chamber of Commerce.
Gravenhurst Chamber of Commerce, pretty straightforward. They're looking to replace the current sign, so it sits just behind the existing garden beds that are there. Probably, it's about at least 10 years old, I would think, and so it's a straight sign replacement.
Howard Johnson?
Howard Johnson is the first property within the CIP. And so they're basically looking to replace, to repair some of the stucco, and then also do a new color. I mean, we'd all be terribly sad to see the pink building disappear. But, so they're basically just looking to do facade improvements, including stucco windows, trim, and a paint job.
Frosty Pine?
Frosty Pine is a new property that is in the expanded area. So they would like to do two different projects. Their ramp needs to be upgraded for accessibility purposes. So they would like to go ahead and put that back up to code. And then as well, the patio. They implemented the patio during COVID as a way to try and serve customers and stay alive, and it has been well received within the community. They'd like to do some upgrades to that area to bring it up to speed, better tables, serve more people, have it be a nicer location. Basically, they did what they could do to get it going, but they want to basically increase the visitor experience there. So structural improvement and patio.
Gravenhurst Curling Club?
Gravenhurst Curling Club, the stair structure needs to be looked at as well. They want to do the exterior overhang and the railings, and basically address some cosmetic and some structural deficiencies that needed to be done. And so they, it's classed as facade improvement because it's it's the entrance of the building, and it's the first thing that you see. So they'd like to make that prettier and do a little bit of touch-ups and things on the other side of the building.
And Boston Pizza?
Boston Pizza, so these guys, they essentially have a door that is very much use at your own risk. It's hanging on for dear life, so they want to replace that door. So it needs to be reframed. They need a new commercial door. They have to put in the additional fireproof and safety measures that are needed. So technically that is classed as a facade improvement because it faces the parking lot by the boardwalk.
Okay, and then we'll go to Kuhn Brothers.
Kuhn Brothers is the fun one because the property is large, but they are looking to do new signage. And so it does touch on Bethune and Jones, which is wild. But essentially they're looking for a new sign.
Okay. Gravenhurst Home Hardware?
Gravenhurst Home Hardware is security cameras. So when we canvassed them during the summer about the CamSafe program, it was only reimbursing $250 towards existing cameras. They indicated that they needed more coverage than that could cover. And so we encouraged them to apply for the Downtown of Tomorrow grant. So that is what you're seeing there.
Okay, and the patio?
The patio, so they are back again. I do think this is maybe the fourth year that they've put in an application, but they are looking to put in a new walkway, fix up some of the barn doors. So the patio is, the property is the actual outdoor patio. Then there's a building, and in behind there is a barn that has been repurposed. Previous applications talked about turning it into an event space and all of that. So they're continuing to upgrade that back building and then do electrical as well. So technically, it's a combination of landscape and structural improvement.
Okay, and the last one is the private.
The last one is the private residence on Muskoka Road South.
Okay,
And as Ellen told us, windows, siding, interior, paint, curb appeal, fencing, maybe.
so just for clarification and the committee's information, there is $184,000 and $184,720 ask. And we have a $206,000 bank account to give that out. Now, is there anything in these applications right now that the committee would feel that they'd want to bring up, talk about?
I have two questions.
Yes?
First one being, like some of the places that have applied before, say the patio, you said that they applied last year or the year before. Have they gone through and finished like the things that they said they were going to do before? Like they've completed the application in the past?
Through Mr. Chair, yes, they have done everything they said they would do.
Okay. And then, yeah, so for the other one, like saying for the residential that they need new windows or they have single pane windows, is it something that they'll send a picture and be like, oh, here's my single pane window to like verify?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. So we ask the applicants to supply pictures of the existing structure, quotes of what they're looking at doing, then we go do a final inspection. If something doesn't jive between A and B, then we reserve the right not to give them the money or to not give them the full extent of what was asked for. So there hasn't been an issue with that yet. We've had a few where, well, I said I was going to put blue siding, but I chose brown. Yeah, fine. So there are some checks and balances before the money is released.
Okay, I just did a quick Google search of a couple of the places and I'm like, oh, doesn't look like a single pane window to me, but.
Joe?
Thank you, through you. Number 9 and 14, when in regards to signs, can we put a condition that it's in accordance with the Gravenhurst sign bylaw? You know, that we're not giving money to something that we don't permit?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So yes, in the agreement, it does, there is a stipulation that says everything must be in accordance with building, fire, planning, sign permits. So they do have to apply for that, and we do check to make sure they were applied, inspected, and closed before the money's released. As well, when the application comes in, we check to see were there outstanding permits, were there outstanding taxes, any issues or orders on the property. So everybody here at this point is good to go, and they would have to continue that compliance to get the money before the end.
Cameron?
I only have two objections, the website for the one guy and the house, the last project. I don't support either of those.
And I understand where you're coming from, and I totally support your comment on the e-commerce. One of these years that we're going to come to this committee meeting, and we're going to have $206,000 to give out, and we're going to have $480,000 of ask. I think in saying what you're saying, and e-commerce is a push, and it's not part of that program, I think we should maybe take a look at extracting a portion of it that out of the ask. Councillor Morphy?
Thank you. I understand. This is facades and beautification, but I think e-commerce is the way of the future. Like, that's how businesses are going to operate in the future. It's everybody goes to the website to see people's menus, and you know, restaurants need support and all that. So I'm torn when we have the money. I think if you know, in removing it.
And I
But it does
understand-
set a precedent. I get it. I get it.
It does set precedent, and when we don't have the money and somebody comes to us and says, well, I can go back to 2025 and say, and I think it's prudent of the committee to stick with what the structure has been approved by council and go forward. And you're right, e-commerce is the way of life now. So does that recommendation need to go back to council and have, and you be our prime example of, and support going forward and bring it up at the council meeting when this is going to be approved at council and say, we need to look at what the recommendations are for the CIP, and maybe e-commerce has to go into the program. But as of right now, it's not. So that's where we're.
If I may, then why is it here if it's not part of it? These were all vetted, right? Like, why is e-commerce before us if it's not?
Amy was being nice.
Okay, thank you.
Basically?
Basically.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, it's, the downtown of tomorrow category is reasonably vague. So as staff, I took a leap. So that's why it's here.
Okay. Any comments in regards to Cameron's interest in the item 17 and the non-support? I know it's part of the program. I know it's difficult to look at, but it's in the commercial area of the CIP program. Heidi, any questions from you?
Well, I would just say because it is part of the program, I think we have a responsibility to consider it.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else not supporting the item 17? Okay.
One question about it. I'm really torn on that one. But for example, they do the renovations. Do they have to show to you, okay, this is our new tenant that's renting the one room and they've signed a lease for a year and that's what it's being used for?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no. We don't get that granular into the business operations. We unofficially track things like that and try to see is what was promised delivered. But technically, we don't get that granular through the agreements.
Because that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, I feel like it's that we're renovating their house for them and then their daughter could be their tenant, you know?
It could 100% work out that way.
Go ahead.
Okay. I was going to say, through Mr. Chair to the committee, I think I understand completely the struggle with residential. For me, I'm looking at it as, is there a way to, because it's one of the main entrances to our town, and because we're only talking about $10,000, from a staff perspective, we saw value because as you're entering the community, if you see rundown properties and dilapidated houses, you kind of go, what am I coming to? So the merit on our side was if we could incrementally increase the beautification of that corridor, and hopefully then increase property values for future sustainability or for future sale or future use. That's why we see the merit of this. There's lots of properties I would love to wave my magic wand and drive by and say, okay, they have new siding and they have a garden and they have and so to me, it's nice to get an application from an area that we haven't seen a lot of movement on before, and it is one of the main corridors. That's the reason why it's in there and why I would advocate for considering it. They also have to do the work to get the money, so there is the chance that they might not do the work and they might not get the money.
Cameron?
As I said before, my rough barometer was, can I see it? I could drive by that house all day and not tell you it's got new windows. Howard Johnson's, I can tell you it's been improved. Everything else we've given out, you can see visible signs that there's been improvement and money spent there. That's part of my huge objection. Besides being residential, you can't see this. We're not getting anything for our money. Do they have to put a sign in the window or something too?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. So they would have to put a sign in the window. We generally take before and after pictures. So depending on the style of window, there might be a visible change. I mean, not that everybody's going to drive by and notice. But the idea is that, we're aware of what those changes are. We've taken the before and after shots, and we do use that for future marketing. We have not aggressively used residential because two reasons. I think number one, we understood the committee's concern around some of the properties. And two, some of the changes aren't as wow factor as a new paint job, but we do have that documentation proof that it has changed. This particular property, if they're putting on the new siding, somebody might notice that it's not a white house anymore. Now it's a purple house. If they chose purple, they're not choosing purple, but if they were.
Just looking on Google Maps here, I mean, to me, they're using, they have a car parked in the front yard as a parking spot.
Yes.
How much of the house can we see? I don't know. I think maybe something of okay, you can put something towards your fence and making the front look nicer. But I guess I get their point of okay, we're taking the siding off. We should probably re-insulate while we're doing that to help with insulation. But it's maybe okay, we'll do your siding for you. If you want to add insulation while you're doing that, that's your own prerogative. I don't know.
Through Mr. Chair, it is fair to say when they replace the accessory structure, it may accommodate the car that's currently there. But yes, 100% I get it. I totally understand where you're coming from.
It's a difficult, it's a difficult decision. I know from years past in approving these, when it comes to council, there's been windows approved on Bay Street in structures and so on and so forth. And yes, we don't get to see exactly what it looks like with new windows in there. And a new window can look pretty similar to an old window. There's not much difference between a single pane and a double pane when you're doing 50 kilometers an hour up Muskoka Road. And I would say, if you look at full paw potential and they want to replace their roof, there's not much you're going to see driving down the road in that, in the new roof, if it's a flat roof on that building, is it?
Correct.
Yeah. So understand where you're coming from, and unless the program changes, people are still going to be able to apply and go through there. The only thing I can say is we're in a good financial position of 206,000, and we're able to go through and have $21,280, or, don't hold me to that, Mr. Finance, left over to go back into reserves for next year. The only thing I would ask, and this calls back to the e-commerce, we're gonna have to come up with a value to reduce. And if we're gonna do a resolution today and approve it, we'll have to come up with an estimate on the e-commerce portion so that we could reduce that $6,230 request.
Yep, we can do that. Let me just.
Cameron?
You're a taxpayer in town. Would you spend your money on this? This is your tax dollars.
Understanding where you're coming from. And here's what's, so it's in the tax base now, it's in the levy, was approved by council back in 2010 or 11. And as a taxpayer, I support what the council has done through the province to put this program together to improve our community in the downtown area. I can't say whether I would support, if it comes from the province, that your community improvement program has to include all of these things, and if it's a commercial area, whether it's residential or not, has to be part of that program. It's a far-reaching question, and I understand where you're coming from. But it's part of the program.
You say it's only $10,000. That $10,000 would go a lot of way fixing up Wayne's Tigers property than doing the windows in this house.
Through Mr. Chair, I don't disagree, however, that property is not applied. It is a hard one. I mean, from my perspective as for manager of economic development, yes, I would invest. I mean, there are probably other projects that are a lot more expensive that we invest in that serve a smaller number of people and are probably not even visual because they're buried within the structure or something else. I just sort of look at it as, from an investment attraction perspective, if it's a small amount of money to try and get the incremental growth year over year over year. So somebody comes and says, oh, I want to move to Gravenhurst. These buildings look great. Wow, they've got incredible signage. Or I drove the downtown and I noticed that this, and this were there. So for me, it's anytime the private sector is interested in a public sector program, I get a little nerdy and excited about it because it's something that I have no control over. So that's why, to me, it's a small amount of money to stimulate some civic pride that otherwise I'm not able to generate.
I know that the property that Amy has brought up has been dealt with through the town of Gravenhurst. And we were hoping, because part of the community improvement expansion was to bring that property into the program so that they could do things. I mean, we can't go into the building, but is that building in need of bringing it up to a standard where it's nice to look at when you're driving by? Absolutely. But we have to deal with what we have in front of us. Did we approach that business? No. Okay. So, you know, there's a number of businesses on here that I look at that I can see, and if we're gonna be 80% good with these monies that we're giving out, and I can see, and you know, I don't wanna center anybody out, but the Howard Johnson's is gonna have a great look to it. The Frosty Pint with that upgraded patio out front, and, you know, folks are gonna be able to use that, and it's gonna be visible. So I, in the curling club, fixing their entrances and getting that up to date. So there's a lot of little things that we're pecking away at. I think we're starting to see good results. E-commerce.
So circling back, the quote that they submitted for e-commerce, that they would be eligible to receive up to $3,000 under Downtown of Tomorrow. So we would simply remove that $3,000 cost that's allocated there, and then they would be approved for $3,230.25.
Okay. Can we proceed with a resolution committee? Anybody else? Heidi?
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay. Councillor Morphy?
Oh, thank you, through you. I'm just uncomfortable removing it. If it's part of the program, if it's part of Downtown for Tomorrow, I don't see how we can arbitrarily, like just subjectively decide that it doesn't qualify.
Decide on what?
The website, like the e-commerce.
It's not part of the program.
It's Downtown for Tomorrow. I thought it was a leap. But I think that's what the discussion needs to be. If we remove it, we have to go to council and
It'll have to come through council and
say we've removed e-commerce
so could we
website
put
building from the
amendment
program.
in that if council were to,
So what they're applying for under the Downtown of Tomorrow grant is what we're deeming ineligible. So we technically have the ability to decline any application based on the committee's concerns. But then, yes, I do think we should look at the Downtown of Tomorrow criteria going forward and include that kind of thing. So it's, and because CIP is not one and done, theoretically, they could apply for this in another round. Like they could come back and say, okay, we didn't upgrade our website, but now that e-commerce is officially a something that is named, or not, they could come back and do that. From a administration perspective, we as staff have some recommendations to the program we'd like to talk about at our next meeting. Because there's been some input from our economic development strategy about the program, some input from applicants. So I do think there's some areas that we have to clean up and address from a criteria perspective, but then also potentially the application process and flow. So that some of the things that are coming to the table might not need to come to the table. So if somebody's applying for a new sign, for example, and we know it's a no-brainer, is that something where staff could approve it and bring you a recommendation and it's not going around? So I think that's where e-commerce also sort of fits and the Downtown of Tomorrow kind of fits. Yes. Yeah.
but it won't fit into this round. But that'll be something that council can deal with the Downtown of Tomorrow and expand on it. And
Yes.
so, okay. So that would be reduced to 32, 30, 25.
Yes.
Correct. Okay.
I don't know if this is
Kelsey?
something that, well, I don't know if this is something we should do or not, but is it something worth saying to them of like, oh, we can't do e-commerce? Is there something else on the building that you want to improve that qualifies? Or is it just like, nope, this is
Well, I think
what
they've
happened.
missed the portion of when they can apply.
Oh, I'm just saying for well-fed to modify instead of asking for the e-commerce, like, can they modify that or no?
No,
No, okay.
no. No, then we'd have to go back and ask everybody else, can you want to modify something? Because we've got $21,000 extra, which has now jumped to $24,000 extra. So, committee, can I proceed with a resolution in regards to this?
We got a bill.
Everybody's?
We got a bill.
Heidi? Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Number 5, Jonathan.
What do we call number 7?
Who was the seconder?
It's technically 415 Bethune.
Okay, that's it? I'm using these figures here.
Yes, you are, with the exception of the one.
I changed
Yeah,
it.
perfect. Got it.
So we need to include all the grant aspects into the resolution, each one. We haven't done that yet.
Let's put it as per
Do you want to do a,
Schedule A or something.
I can do that.
Or we can do like a 10-minute sort of break and then we
Okay,
can come back.
why don't we do that?
So just tell Heidi.
Heidi, we're going to take a 10-minute break so that staff can put together a resolution, and we'll incorporate it all and have it perfect, so we'll be back in 10 minutes. Thank you. Thanks, committee.
Just to confirm, Heidi, you can see that, correct?
Yes, I can see it.
Right, so, let me start.
So we'll need a mover and a seconder.
We already did.
Did I get that?
Yep.
Oh, okay, great.
So moved by Councilor Murphy and Kelsey.
Great, okay, thank you. I'm so long since I have recessed, I forgot. Be it resolved that the application number 2025-01 be received, and the Gravenhurst Community Grants Committee hereby recommend that the application be approved. And finally, that the council approve funding in the sum of $15,000 and in keeping with the approved structural improvement and facade guidelines. Be it resolved, the application 2025-02 be received, and that the Gravenhurst Community Grants Committee hereby recommend the application be approved. And finally, that council approve funding in the sum of $20,500 and in keeping with the approved structural improvement and facade guidelines. Be it resolved that application number 2025-03 be received, and that the Gravenhurst Community Grants Committee hereby recommend that the application be approved, and that council approve funding in the sum of $3,230.25, and in keeping with the improved structural improvement, facade, and signage guidelines. Be it resolved that applications number 2025-04 be received, and that the Gravenhurst Community Grants Committee hereby recommend the application be approved. And finally, that council approve funding in the sum of $17,500 and in keeping with the approved structural improvement and facade guidelines. Be it resolved that application number 2025-05 be received, and the Gravenhurst Community Grants Committee hereby recommend the application be approved. And finally, that council approve funding in the sum of $6,033 and in keeping with the approval structural improvement and facade guidelines. Be it resolved that applications 2025-06 be received, and that the Gravenhurst Community Grants Committee hereby recommend the application be approved.
The funding amount is incorrect.
Yeah, 6033.
No. No. That one's fine. Your next one should be 15,000. Sorry. Thank you.
And finally, that council approve funding in the sum of $15,000 and in keeping with the approved structural improvement and facade guidelines. Be it resolved that the application number 2025-07 be received, and that the Gravenhurst Community Grants Committee hereby recommend the application be approved. And finally, that council approve funding in the sum of $15,000 and in keeping with the approved structural improvement and facade guidelines. Be it resolved that application number 2025-08 be received, and that the Gravenhurst Community Grants Committee hereby recommend the application be approved. And finally, that council approve funding in the sum of $2,774 and in keeping with the approved structural improvement, facade, and signage guidelines. Be it resolved that application 2025-09 be received, and that the Gravenhurst Community Grants Committee hereby recommend the application be approved. And finally, that council approve funding in the sum of $18,750 and in keeping with the approved structural improvement and facade guidelines. Be it resolved that application number 2025-10 be received, and that the Gravenhurst Community Grants Committee hereby recommend the application be approved. And finally, that council approve funding in the sum of $11,500 and in keeping with the approved structural improvement and facade guidelines. Be it resolved that application number 2025-11 be received, and that the Gravenhurst Community Grants Committee hereby recommend the application be approved. And finally, that council approve funding in the sum of $15,000 and in keeping with the approved structural improvement and facade guidelines. Be it resolved that application number 2025-12 be received, and the Gravenhurst Community Grants Committee hereby recommend the application be approved. And finally, that council approve funding in the sum of $11,500 and in keeping with the approved structural improvement and facade guidelines. Be it resolved that application 2025-13 be received, and that the Gravenhurst Community Grants Committee hereby recommend the application be approved. And finally, that council approve funding in the sum of $2,400 in keeping with the approved structural improvement, facade, and signage guidelines. Be it resolved that application number 2025-14 be received, and the Gravenhurst Community Grants Committee hereby recommend the application be approved. And finally, that the council approve funding in the sum of $3,000 and in keeping with the approved structural improvement and facade guidelines. Be it resolved that application number 2025-15 be received, and that the Gravenhurst Community Grants Committee hereby recommend the application be approved. And finally, that council approve the funding in the sum of $22,754 and in keeping with the approved structural improvement and facade guidelines. Be it resolved that application number 2025-16 be received, and that the Gravenhurst Community Grants Committee hereby recommend the application be approved. And finally, that council approve funding in the sum of $9,779 and in keeping with the approved structural improvement and facade guidelines. Committee, any questions or comments?
Jonathan, in the first 8, you got be it resolved as plurals. Applications. The rest of them you got as singulars.
Any questions in regards to the funding?
I as well just have a technical. We had a lot of herbies in there instead of herebys, if we want to correct that before it comes to.
Let me fix your minutes.
I feel like I'm sitting in the room with Councillor Jorgensen. Any questions in regards to the resolutions and the amounts set?
No.
All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you, committee. Greatly appreciated.
May 5th.
So the next meeting date will be May 5th, 9 a.m. here in council chambers. One other comment will be that these recommendations and hard work that this committee has done will be going to council and approved by staff. So although we have made our recommendations, it's not etched in stone until council gives its blessing. So that's just policy and procedure. Now I have a motion to adjourn. Kelsey, Joe, all those in favor? I thank the committee. Thank you, Heidi, for joining us remotely. And
Thank you.
go home and get your shovels out. We're getting another 40 centimeters of snow. Yeah, supposedly.